miles to
First and foremost, Zachary Parents for inviting me on a Friday to give a talk at the university gathering. I'm actually surprised that we have got a few people on a Friday. But that's a good sign from you and your sacrifice. So I like that you're being here. And let's hope that we can do something together. Because the topic at hand is quite pertinent and quite important for the Muslim community. Quite important to the Muslim community and also the contemporary situation. So as soon as you mention the word political and Islam, it has tremendous negative connotations. It carries a lot of weight and burden with it. And unfortunately, political Islam is viewed as a generator of terrorism, as a generator of divisive means within the global arena that we live in. And this is one of many aspects of Islam that has been appropriated or hijacked from the main body of Muslims. And therefore it's extremely important for us to understand what is political Islam, what is the concept of Western ideology and thought of politics vis-a-vis Islamic thought, and why there appears to be such a difference. Why is it necessary for the Western world in particularly to ensure that there is no rise of such a thing called political Islam? Now, in order to understand political Islam, we need to understand the whole concept of the nationhood state and the political concepts that emerged in West as well as the Muslim world. If we look at the Western world and the origins of the nationhood state, this is not something that has been universal. I mean, England did not exist from time immemorial. France, Germany, Switzerland, Sweden, these are modern concepts. In human history, they're very recent. So the concept of nationhood state is very recent. And in fact, if you look at Europe from approximately 500 from the 6th century to the middle of 15th century, so nearly a millennium, 1,000 years, the whole of the European Empire was run by the Catholic Church. It was a Catholic movement. The whole of Europe, in fact, it also coincides with the era that is known as the Dark Ages of Europe. So when the Catholic Church was controlling Europe, it was also known as the medieval period, the Dark Era. So the European relations with faith coincides with something that's negative. And it required wars in Europe. In fact, two major wars took place. One is called the 100-Year War. In fact, it lasted for 116 years, which was mainly between Britain and France, but its repercussions were throughout Europe, in which thousands of people died. But the second war, which was the 30-Year War, which was much more significant, which was fought in around the 17th century, between 1518 and 1648. In this 30 years, the war that ravaged Europe was so horrendous and so savage that it made approximately 30% of the population was killed. 30% of European population was killed. And at the end of that period, a treaty was signed known as the Westphalia Treaty. The Treaty of Westphalia is central to anybody who wants to understand the origins and the genesis of the Western nationhood state. At the end of this 30-year war, in which a third of the European population was destroyed, there emerged nationhood states. And the emergence of nationhood states and the Treaty of Westphalia was to divorce faith from politics. So the whole era of the Roman Catholic, from 500 up until the middle of the 17th century, in which Europe is regarded to be in the medieval Dark Ages, Europe had to fight wars in which saw its children and its women and its men being decimated. And it is through this emancipation, through this enlightenment, that started breathing a fresh air. They were a free people. Reason now was supreme over faith. And this was something enlightened. This was very good for the Europeans. It was the Renaissance. Later on, the Renaissance came in. But this was a good move for Europe to get away from faith. So when Europeans talk about nationhood states, they have a positive thing. They have a positive aspect. But for Muslims, there's something different. Before I come to the Muslim concept of nationhood states, just want to look at political Islam itself, and then I'll talk about Islamic. Now, what is political Islam? It's very important in this day and age to understand what are we talking about when we discuss political Islam. Is it something that is derived from faith? Is it something that started because of the fall of Ottoman Khilafah? Once the Khilafah was destroyed, was it something trying to revive and parallel to the nationhood states within the Islamic kingdom? Or is it something completely alien from the main body of Islamic thought and ideas? Because these are the potential possibilities of what those antagonists to Islamic ideas and ideals consider political Islam to be. That political Islam is divisive, it's not part of Islamic body. But as soon as you mention the word Islam to Muslims, and we repeat this almost all the time to either non-Muslims or amongst ourselves, that Islam is a comprehensive way of life. As soon as you mention that Islam is a comprehensive way of life, in it you include politics. You can't divorce politics from a comprehensive way of system, because politics determine around which parameters your life will be ruled or dictated upon. And therefore, political Islam is part of Islam. As I mentioned right at the beginning, it is a shame that in this day and age that if anybody was to mention that I'm a political Islamist, the negative connotation, in fact, people would be scared to say that because of the environment that has been created against it. But then what is political? What are Muslims? If we do not want to have an idea in the political arena, then we are not fulfilling the rights and the concept of Islam, because Islam is a comprehensive way of life. And therefore Muslims, as Islamists, must have a political idea. As much as the Conservative have it, as much as the Labour Party have it, as much as the Liberal Democrats have it, or the CND or the environmentalists have it, Muslims must also have it. We shouldn't shy away from it. It's a long way from theoretical to practical, because once again, sorry to repeat myself many times, but it's very, very important for us to understand that we need to regain the